It was a typical Tuesday afternoon at Redwood High School. The sound of pencils scratching against paper filled the air as students tried to stay awake in the dimly lit physics classroom. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long, lazy shadows on the desks, while the hum of the old fluorescent lights seemed to lull everyone into a kind of sleepy trance. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded louder than usual, echoing the ticking countdown to the end of the day. The room, filled with wooden desks arranged in neat rows, had a familiar smell, a mixture of chalk dust, aged textbooks, and something faintly metallic. In the front of the class stood Mr. Davis, a middle-aged teacher whose graying hair and tired eyes gave away the fact that he'd been teaching for years. He wore the same rumpled tweed jacket he always wore, and his spectacles rested low on his nose, as if perched there for decades. "All right, class," Mr. Davis called, his voice tinged with the weariness of another long day. "Today, we're going to do a simple physics demonstration. Nothing too complicated. We're going to test the strength of different materials and see how force affects them." There was a collective groan from the students, the kind that comes from the realization that more science experiments were about to be crammed into their already overstuffed schedules. Some students were quietly scrolling through their phones under their desks. Others were doodling aimlessly in their notebooks, pretending to be interested. Only a few were paying attention. Among the disinterested faces was Alex, a 20-year-old senior who had grown accustomed to the predictable routine of school. He sat near the back of the classroom, his mind often wandering off into thoughts of what he would do after graduation. His brown hair was messy, as if he had rushed to get to class, and his hoodie was slightly wrinkled from being thrown on hurriedly. Alex wasn't bad at physics. He had an excellent understanding of the concepts, but lacked the enthusiasm his classmates had for the subject. To him, science was just another set of rules, another challenge to overcome in the race to finish high school. But that afternoon, something about the ordinary setup of the classroom felt different. There was an unusual energy in the air, as if the universe itself was preparing for something that neither Alex nor anyone else in the room could predict. Mr. Davis began to set up the materials for the demonstration. Various metal rods, a stack of books, and a massive steel plate. The plan was simple. They would apply force to different materials and see how much weight they could bear before breaking or bending. The demonstration was supposed to be straightforward, an easy lesson in force and pressure. But the students didn't know that something far beyond the realm of simple physics was about to unfold. "Alex," Mr. Davis called suddenly, his eyes scanning the room. "You're always so quick with answers. How about you help me with this experiment today?" Alex blinked, momentarily startled by the unexpected attention. He wasn't exactly the type to volunteer for anything, but there was something in Mr. Davis's tone that made it hard to say no. Sure," Alex said, reluctantly standing up. The other students snickered quietly, some pretending to fall asleep to avoid having to participate. He made his way to the front, feeling a slight flutter in his chest. His palms were a little sweaty, but that was nothing new. He wasn't nervous about being called on in class. No, what felt strange was the sudden sense of being in the spotlight. Alex wasn't used to this kind of attention. "Okay," Mr. Davis continued. "You're going to lift this steel plate here, just like we practiced in the textbook, and we'll see how much force it takes to bend it." Alex looked at the steel plate. It was huge, larger than anything he had ever lifted. It had to weigh at least a couple 100 pounds. "Sure thing," Alex muttered, rolling up his sleeves. His classmates watched him with a mixture of indifference and mild amusement. They all assumed it would be like every other time. Alex would lift the object, and it would just stay as stiff as it always did in the textbooks. The excitement of science demos was long gone, and the students had grown used to the routine of Mr. Davis's experiments. But as Alex's fingers touched the cold, smooth surface of the steel, something strange happened. A tingle of warmth spread through his palms, something he had never felt before in his body. He chalked it up to his nerves, just a little anxious energy before the demonstration. After all, It was just a physics demo, right? Go ahead, Mr. Davis urged. Alex crouched down, prepared to grasp the steel plate, but as his fingers wrapped around the edges, he felt an odd sensation, a pulse of energy. It started small, almost like an electric shock, but it grew rapidly, surging through his muscles. His hand gripped the steel with ease, and he began to lift it, expecting it to be as heavy as it looked. But as the plate started to move, Alex's eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't heavy. Not at all. In fact, it felt lighter than a sheet of paper in his hands. Before he could process what was happening, the steel plate rose effortlessly off the ground. Alex's face went blank, his mind struggling to catch up with the reality unfolding in front of him. The class had fallen silent. "Alex?" Mr. Davis's voice cracked through the stunned stillness. The students turned, their eyes glued to the scene unfolding before them. The metal plate was floating in Alex's hands, lifted with minimal effort. The physics textbook that had seemed so mundane just moments ago suddenly felt inadequate in the face of the impossible. "Ah, Mr. Davis?" Alex asked, trying to regain his composure. His voice shook as his grip tightened around the steel plate, now hovering just a foot above the floor. He could feel the strength surging through his arms, as though every fiber in his body was working in unison to hold the massive object. But it was as though the metal wasn't heavy at all. Mr. Davis's mouth dropped open. He took a step back, eyes wide, not sure what to say. The rest of the class was frozen, their gazes flickering between Alex and the floating plate. "Put it down, Alex," Mr. Davis said shakily, his voice barely above a whisper. But Alex couldn't. As soon as he tried to release the plate, he felt an overwhelming urge to keep holding it. His muscles felt as though they were infused with power beyond anything he had ever experienced. Something inside him seemed to have clicked, and he felt an overwhelming surge of force. He could feel the air around him shift as if gravity itself were bending to his will. "Ah, what's happening?" someone asked from the back of the room. The voice broke the silence, but no one could take their eyes off Alex. The tension in the room was palpable, the students now wide-eyed with confusion and awe. As Alex slowly began to lower the plate, it dawned on him. This was no ordinary physics demo. The feeling in his body, the strength pulsing through his veins, was something that he couldn't explain. He had just lifted a piece of metal that should have been impossible for a human to lift. And as the classroom buzzed with murmurs and disbelief, Alex realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The steel plate was finally back on the floor, but the classroom was far from normal. The once bustling, lively atmosphere of a high school science class had been replaced with a suffocating silence. Every student's eyes were locked on Alex, whose hands were still trembling slightly from the aftershock of the display. The metal plate lay on the ground as if it had just been placed there, but Alex knew it was far heavier than it had any right to be. His mind raced, trying to understand what had just happened, but every thought was interrupted by the growing confusion on his classmates' faces. He stood there, in the center of the room, his fingers still tingling as if the strength hadn't fully dissipated. The teacher, Mr. Davis, was the first to break the silence. His voice was shaky, as though he too was struggling to process what had just occurred. "Alex," Mr. Davis started, his voice trailing off as if he couldn't find the right words. What did you do?" Alex tried to speak, but his throat felt tight. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. He had no explanation. The sensation of lifting the steel plate, the raw power surging through his arms, it didn't make sense. His body had reacted without his conscious control, as though something had awakened deep inside him. He wasn't sure if it was fear or awe, but something about the experience felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The class remained still, everyone waiting for an answer that Alex didn't have. His best friend, Matt, was the first to speak up. "Dude, what just happened?" Matt's voice cracked, his eyes wide. That wasn't normal. No way. You just lifted that thing like it was nothing." Alex turned to Matt, his best friend's shocked face mirrored by the expressions of everyone else in the room. His classmates were staring at him like he had just come from another planet. They had never seen him act this way before. And to be honest, Alex hadn't seen himself act this way either. I don't know," Alex muttered, trying to find some rational explanation. But nothing made sense. How could he explain something so impossible? His head spun with questions that had no answers. How was this even happening? Why was this happening? The weight of everyone's gaze felt unbearable. Alex was aware of the situation spiraling out of control. The room was filled with a strange energy, a tension that could be cut with a knife. And then, as if to confirm his worst fears, the door to the classroom opened. Principal Adams, a tall, stern man with a strict air about him, walked in. His face was grim, and he scanned the room for the source of the disturbance. He noticed the teacher first, still standing frozen at the front, and then turned his eyes to Alex, who was still standing by the metal plate. "What's going on here?" Principal Adams demanded. His gaze shifted from Alex to Mr. Davis, who, in turn, glanced nervously at the students. There's been an incident," Mr. Davis said, his voice shaky. "I'm not sure how to explain it. But Alex, he trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. The principal's sharp eyes locked onto Alex. "Alex, what happened?" Alex swallowed hard. He couldn't hide what had just happened. "I don't know, sir. I just lifted that steel plate, and it felt easy. Too easy. I don't know why. It's like I was stronger than I should be." The words hung in the air like a bomb ready to explode, and as if on cue, the room erupted into chaotic chatter. Students whispered to one another, pointing at Alex with looks of disbelief, while others simply stared, wide-eyed, still processing the enormity of what they had just witnessed. Principal Adams narrowed his eyes. He took a few steps toward Alex, inspecting him closely, as though searching for any sign of explanation. "How did you do this, Alex?" he asked again, this time with more urgency in his voice. "Tell me everything." Before Alex could respond, a loud knock came at the door, and two men in suits entered. Their faces were stern, their eyes scanning the room like predators on the hunt. They didn't introduce themselves, but there was something about them, something cold and calculating, that made everyone's skin crawl. "Principal Adams," one of the men said, his voice clipped and businesslike. "We need to speak with Alex." Immediately. The principal hesitated for a moment, then nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, his tone soft. He looked at Alex again, and his expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Alex, I think it's best if you go with them. They can help explain what's going on." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He didn't trust these men in suits. There was something about them that felt off, like they were hiding something. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want to go with them. Before he could make a move, one of the men stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Alex with a cold intensity. "Come with us, son," the man said firmly. "You don't want to make this difficult." Alex's gut twisted. The words were so calm, so controlled, but there was an undeniable force behind them. This wasn't just about a physics demonstration anymore. This was about something bigger, something far beyond what Alex had ever imagined. He glanced around the room at his classmates, his friends. Everyone was watching him, but no one spoke up. They were frozen in place, unsure of what to do, what to say. Matt's face was filled with worry, and for a brief moment, Alex saw the desperation in his eyes. But he didn't feel like he could stay. Not with these men looming over him. "Where are you taking me?" Alex asked, his voice coming out shaky despite his best efforts to sound confident. The man in the suit gave a small, knowing smile. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. "Just cooperate, and this will go much easier for you." Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what they wanted from him, but he had a sinking feeling that it wasn't good. As the men moved toward him, Alex took a step back, his mind racing. This wasn't normal. None of this was. What had happened to him? Why was he being singled out? Was it really just a freak accident? Or was there something more? Something that was about to change everything he knew about himself and the world before he could think any more on it. One of the men grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. Alex tried to pull away, but the grip was firm, too firm. They were taking him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Alex," Mr. Davis called from behind him, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea this would happen." Alex's heart sank. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to be taken away. But as the men in suits led him out of the classroom, he knew one thing for sure. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The door swung shut behind him, and the room fell silent once more, the echo of his footsteps lingering in the air. As Alex was escorted down the hall, he could feel the weight of the moment crashing down on him. The power he had unleashed was no accident. It was something more. Something deep inside him had awakened, and he had no idea what the consequences would be. But one thing was clear. He had just become a part of something much bigger than he ever imagined. The cold, sterile environment of the school hallway felt like a sharp contrast to the chaos Alex had just left behind. The men in suits were leading him through the empty corridors, their firm hands gripping his arms like iron shackles, guiding him down a path that he wasn't sure he wanted to take. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the situation was sinking deeper into his chest. The air felt thick, oppressive, and as they moved further from the classroom, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled into something far bigger than he could understand. His thoughts were racing, desperately trying to piece together everything that had just happened. He had lifted that steel plate like it was nothing, defying everything he had learned about physics. The strange sensation that had coursed through his body, the raw power that surged through his muscles, it was all too much for him to process in one go. And now, these men in suits were dragging him away like he was some kind of experiment. He had no idea what was going on, but he knew one thing. He couldn't trust them. "Where are we going?" Alex asked, his voice more forceful than he intended. He twisted his wrist slightly in an attempt to loosen their grip, but the men held firm. "Quiet," the taller man growled, a chilling edge in his voice. "We don't have time for questions. Just follow us." Alex was trying to stay calm, trying to think, but his mind was clouded with too many questions. Why had this happened to him? Was it some kind of freak accident, or was there something more to it? The thought that he had unlocked some hidden potential within himself terrified him. But the even bigger fear was what these men, and the people they worked for, wanted from him. What did they know about what was happening to him? Were they going to lock him away, experiment on him, or worse, use him for something he didn't understand? They arrived at a nondescript door at the end of the hallway. One of the men in suits produced a keycard, swiping it across the reader beside the door. The door clicked open with a soft, mechanical sound, and Alex was shoved inside. He stumbled into a small, dimly lit room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal. The only furniture in the room was a single metal chair, positioned in the center, under a harsh fluorescent light. The walls were bare, save for a small security camera mounted in the corner. The atmosphere felt clinical, like a holding cell, and Alex couldn't help but feel like a prisoner. "Sit," one of the men commanded, his voice low and demanding. Alex hesitated, glancing from one man to the other. He knew he had no choice but to comply for now. He sank into the chair, his mind spinning with anxiety. As soon as he sat down, the door slammed shut behind him, and he was left alone in the room with his thoughts. The coldness of the room matched the chill in his spine. What was going to happen to him? What did these people want from him? Minutes passed like hours. He sat motionless, unable to stop the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his head. He wondered if anyone at school had realized he was gone yet. Was Matt worried? Had his teachers called his parents? The thought of them being kept in the dark while he was being held in some unknown place made him feel helpless. Finally, the door creaked open again, and the two men entered. The taller one had an expressionless face, while the shorter man, whose dark eyes never left Alex, carried a briefcase. The tall man walked toward a nearby desk and opened a folder, flipping through a few papers before turning his gaze to Alex. "Alex Turner," he began, his voice cold and formal. "You're not the first one we've encountered with unusual abilities, but you're certainly the most interesting. What you demonstrated in that classroom wasn't a coincidence. It's not a simple accident of physics. You're different." Alex sat up straighter in the chair, his pulse quickening. "What are you talking about? I don't even know how I did that. I was just trying to help with a demo. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." The man raised an eyebrow, as though he had expected this reaction. He glanced at his partner, who opened the briefcase and pulled out a small tablet. The device powered up with a soft hum, and the man handed it to Alex. "Take a look." Alex hesitated, then took the tablet from the man's outstretched hand. On the screen was a video, but it wasn't just any video. It was footage of him lifting the steel plate, footage that Alex hadn't seen before. The clarity of the image sent a shiver down his spine as he watched himself effortlessly lift the massive object. His body was clearly not struggling in any way, and the power radiating from him was undeniable. "How is this possible?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The shorter man spoke now, his voice as cold and precise as the tall one's. "That's what we're here to find out. You see, Alex, what you've demonstrated is not a trick of the mind, nor is it a result of some freakish accident. What you felt, what you've unlocked, is the manifestation of human potential, something that goes beyond the limits of normal human capabilities." Alex's heart began to race again, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. "What do you mean by that?" He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He had no idea what they were talking about, but the words sounded ominous, like they were talking about something far bigger than a simple strength demonstration. "Human super strength," the tall man said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You have the ability to surpass normal human limitations. Your strength is not just a matter of muscle. It's something that goes deeper, biologically, genetically, and perhaps even beyond. What we're dealing with here is not an isolated incident. You're part of a very select group of individuals who've shown these kinds of abilities, and we need to understand how it works." Alex's mind was racing. "What do you want from me?" His voice shook as the reality of the situation started to sink in. "What do you mean? We? Who are you? What is this place?" The shorter man stepped forward. "We work for a government agency. We monitor and track individuals with abilities like yours. You're a potential asset, Alex, and we want to help you harness this power." Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Help me? You're just going to lock me up, aren't you? Experiment on me like some kind of lab rat?" The taller man shook his head slowly. "No, Alex, we don't want to hurt you. But you need to understand that your abilities aren't just some random occurrence. They're a gift. And gifts like yours, well, they don't go unnoticed. People like you can change the world." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," the tall man continued, "that we're prepared to help you understand this power, but you'll need to work with us. In exchange, you'll have the tools and resources to control your abilities, and use them however you choose." A wave of realization washed over Alex. The sense of fear, of being trapped, faded slightly. Maybe they weren't here to hurt him. But what did it mean to have this power? What would it mean for his life, his future? He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted any part of it, yet now, it seemed inescapable. For the first time, Alex allowed himself to consider the possibility of something more. The chance to control what was inside him, to use it for good. But what would that even look like? And who else out there knew about this? About him? "We'll give you time to think about it," the tall man said. "You'll be safe here. But know this, the longer you wait, the less control you'll have over your powers." Alex leaned back in the chair, trying to process everything that had just been thrown at him. What did he want? What kind of future could he even imagine now? With great power came great responsibility. But Alex didn't know if he was ready to take on that kind of burden. He was just a regular guy who had accidentally discovered something impossible. And now, his life was about to change forever. The sterile, windowless room where Alex had been held felt even more suffocating now that the truth was out. He had been sitting there for hours, his mind reeling from everything he had learned. The government agents, the promises of power and control, the questions about his future. It all felt like too much. He had never asked for this, never wanted any part of it. All he had wanted was a normal life, one that didn't involve being dragged into a secret government operation and used as some kind of test subject. But now, as he sat in the cold chair, he had to admit that things had changed. His life had taken a turn he couldn't undo, and the question wasn't whether he had powers. He did. It was what he was going to do with them. "Alex," a voice called from the doorway. It was the same man who had been talking to him earlier, the one with the cold eyes and the no-nonsense attitude. His expression was still as impassive as ever, but there was something in the way he spoke now, something more sincere. "It's time to make a decision." Alex didn't reply right away. He had been thinking long and hard about the offer these men had given him. They had promised him resources, support, training, everything he would need to control his newfound abilities. But there was something unsettling about it. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be controlled by them, to be a pawn in their game, even if they said they were helping him. "I don't know if I can do this," Alex said finally, his voice thick with doubt. He stood up, walking to the small window in the room and staring out at the gray, overcast sky. "I never asked for any of this. I just lifted a damn steel plate, and now my whole life's falling apart." The agent stepped forward, his boots clicking on the tile floor. "Alex, no one asked for this, but you can't deny that this is a gift. You've seen what you're capable of. You can be more than you ever imagined. But it comes with a responsibility, a duty to control it, to use it for the greater good." Alex turned to face the agent, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean? Greater good? Whose greater good are we talking about here? The government's? Yours? Because I'm not sure I trust anyone right now, especially you guys." The agent didn't flinch. "I understand your frustration. But I'm telling you, Alex, there's a bigger picture here. There are others like you, people with abilities beyond normal human capabilities. Some of them are dangerous, and they don't have the moral compass you do. That's why we need you to work with us. You don't have to agree with everything we say, but you need to understand that you're part of something bigger than yourself." Alex looked down at his hands. He could still feel the faint tingle of power coursing through his fingers, a reminder of the strength he had displayed in that classroom. It was exhilarating, but it was also terrifying. He had no idea how to control it. He didn't even know what he could do with it, let alone how to keep it from hurting someone. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Alex whispered, more to himself than to the agent. "I just wanted to be normal." The agent's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Alex saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I know, and that's why we want you to be part of this. You're not just some weapon, Alex. You have the ability to make a real difference. We can help you control it, but you have to make the choice." Alex turned back to the window. The gray sky outside was heavy with clouds, as though the world itself was reflecting his inner turmoil. He wasn't sure what to do. What if they were right? What if he had the power to do something incredible, something that could change the world? But what if they were just using him, manipulating him into becoming something he wasn't? He didn't want to be a tool for anyone's agenda. He wanted to be in control of his own life, his own destiny. For a long moment, Alex stood there in silence, his thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Then something shifted inside him. A quiet resolve began to settle deep within his chest. He had always prided himself on being independent, on doing things his own way. Maybe this wasn't what he had asked for, but it was what he had now. And it was up to him to decide what to do with it. "I'll do it," Alex said finally, his voice steady. "I'll work with you, but only on my terms. No more secrets, no more lies. I need to know what's really going on, and I need to have control over how this power is used." The agent nodded. "That's all we can ask for, Alex. We'll help you harness your abilities, and we'll be here to guide you every step of the way. But make no mistake, this is your choice, and your future." Alex's heart was pounding in his chest, but there was something else, a flicker of hope, of possibility. For the first time since this all started, he felt like he was finally taking control of his own life. Maybe this was the beginning of something great, something he couldn't yet fully understand. But whatever it was, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. Over the next few days, Alex went through intense training, both physical and mental. The government agents, who he learned were part of a top-secret organization known as the Specialized Human Enhancement Division, put him through rigorous exercises designed to test and strengthen his abilities. They provided him with state-of-the-art equipment, advanced technology, and scientific research that helped him better understand the extent of his powers. At first, it was overwhelming. Alex had always been strong, but this was something else entirely. He could lift weights far beyond what a normal human could ever hope to carry. His reflexes were faster, his senses heightened. He could run for miles without tiring, and he could push his body to limits that seemed impossible. But with each new discovery, Alex also learned more about the consequences. The strain on his body could be immense if he pushed himself too far, and the responsibility weighed on him like a heavy burden. The agents continued to watch over him, guiding him as he grew stronger. But Alex kept his distance from them, unwilling to fully trust them or their motives. He had learned enough to know that they weren't entirely forthcoming about everything. They had their own agenda, and he needed to be cautious. As the weeks passed, Alex began to feel more in control. He had developed a deep understanding of his abilities, and with that understanding came a new sense of purpose. He realized that he could use his powers for good, not just as a tool for others to manipulate. One afternoon, while undergoing another training session, Alex had a breakthrough. He stood in a large training room, a massive steel barrier in front of him. He had been tasked with breaking through the wall using nothing but his strength. His body was exhausted from the training, but he had a new sense of determination. "Focus," he whispered to himself, taking a deep breath. His muscles tensed, and he charged forward, slamming his shoulder into the steel barrier. The impact was incredible. The metal bent and twisted under the force of his blow, but he didn't stop there. He pressed on, using his full strength, until the barrier finally shattered into pieces. Standing amidst the wreckage, Alex felt a surge of pride. He had done it. He had broken through his own limits, and for the first time since this journey began, he felt like he was in control. The agents were watching from the observation deck above, and they nodded in approval. But Alex knew that this was only the beginning. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand. His journey was far from over. But now he had a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. He was in charge of his own destiny, and he would use his powers to shape the world on his terms. As he walked out of the training room, his mind raced with the possibilities. What would he do next? How could he make a difference? One thing was certain. He wasn't going to let this power go to waste. He had the ability to change the world. And now, he was going to use it. Alex turned back to look at the facility behind him. He had stepped into a new world, one filled with uncertainty, but also with endless possibilities. And for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The new beginning had arrived.